Any and all comments, theories, and speculation I have ever made about Jessica Moloney were 100% based on media meant for public consumption. Today I am going to address some of the statements I made, why I made them, and every source that they came from.
Look, I suppose money makes the world go round. It's personally not it's not my main driving force for my job. It's not money. But of course, if you're making a lot of money for someone else and you're seeing the money you're making and you aren't cutting that, there's kind of, when you're an agent or you're a manager and you do those roles, you realize quickly that really the person is buying into you. Same with talent. Talent is buying into me. The talent isn't buying into the agency I'm at or the company I'm at. They connect with me and they like the way that I work. So the same way that, if you're making all this money for someone, you're getting those jobs because the client likes you, or, like you're managing to negotiate a good deal. I can negotiate that deal on my own.
So she starts off by saying that money makes the world go round, and it's not her main driving force for her job, to make money. Then she continues on to describe a very weird way of working at an agency as an agent. Jess's claim that talent connects primarily with her way of working ignores the agency's role in providing credibility, casting access, and deal-making power, especially if she was not a high-profile agent. When she was working for an agency like Donna Management, she was not exactly a big enough name on her own to be making these claims that she was so special that the talent was buying into her specifically over the prestigious name of the company that she was working for, which was definitely far more well-known than she was at the time. Not to mention that by the end of this statement, she goes on to say that she can make that money on her own, and the implication that it's not fair if someone else is making this money on her hard work. Now, that's not to say that I can't understand someone wanting to be paid for the work they do. I am saying that Jess started this entire rant with specifically saying her driving force for her job wasn't money, and then talks about personal connections with clients as if that's more important, but circles back around to saying that she deserves all that money on her own. So, which is it? Is money her driving force or isn't it?
Renelle was it. Renelle was the reason that I left. Renelle was the reason I started on my own. So I basically went to my boss at the time and I was like, hey, we've got to rep this girl. She's fucking fire. Now, I have never worked with a photographer. At this point, I'd worked with talent, so celebrity sort of talent. So I was like, I never worked with a photographer, but I was like, I'll figure it out. I feel like if you can manage, if you're an agent or a manager, you can kind of sell anything, so to speak.
Now we have these two statements. The first one being that she left her job at Donna Management presumably because she wanted to rep Renelle. I do have a few questions about this situation, but I fully admit that I don't know exactly how this may have worked. I do know that by the end of her career at Donna Management, she had been named as a director. However, she says in this story that she went to her boss to say that they had to rep Renelle. Why exactly did she have a boss if she was the director? I'm not saying that she didn't have a superior or something, but I suppose I question why, if they had made her a director, then why she didn't have the ability to just represent Renelle without permission at that point. Wouldn't they have trusted her on her own to decide which clients to sign and which clients not to sign? Wouldn't that have been why she was the director? Continuing on to what she says next, where she first says that at that point she had only worked with talent, but then quickly corrects herself to say celebrity sort of talent, which, in my opinion, leaves the implication that she didn't believe Renelle to be on the same level of importance of talent to these celebrities that she had already allegedly worked with. However, that is just my personal opinion. What's more interesting to me is that she explains that she didn't ever do this sort of work before and wanted to rep Renelle, but she would just figure it out, and continues on to say that if you're in her line of work you can sell anything. It strikes me, personally, as something a grifter or con artist would say, that she can sell anything she wants to anyone and she can do anything she wants if she wants to, regardless of how qualified she is, just because she believes she can do it. Which has also led to my former statements on me believing that it's possible that she could be a narcissist or have narcissistic personality disorder. I do want to stress that I am not a doctor or a psychiatrist, and I know I cannot diagnose people over the internet. But this is one of the many things over the course of her statements that pulls me in the direction of her being a narcissist. In my opinion, because she definitely speaks like she is one.
but I could see that, like, I honestly, the same way that I felt about Kells, like the way where I was like, this guy's incredible. Like he's going to be huge. Like he'll be everything. I felt that way about Renelle.
This has always rubbed me the wrong way because she speaks about Machine Gun Kelly as if she had just discovered him or as if she knew he was going to be huge before anyone else knew he was going to be huge. That is the impression I'm getting here how she describes this. Now, the problem with this is that he was already discovered and famous well before the point she met him. When her brother allegedly said, "Listen to this guy," how else was she supposed to be listening to him? MGK signed with Bad Boy Records in 2011 and hit mainstream fame by 2012. Jess didn't even seem to really have contact with him until a few years after that point. She even mentions contacting his team at the time so she could style him. Yet, here she's acting like she had discovered MGK and knew he was going to be huge and everything like that, which doesn't make any sense. She didn't discover MGK. She's the furthest away from knowing anything about him. He wasn't up and coming or unknown when she allegedly convinced him to come to her with Donna Management, of which there's literally no evidence outside of Jess saying that this happened. He was already famous. Why she's saying this as if she saw some special thing no one else saw and discovered him in comparison to Renelle, who isn't even a musician, she's a photographer, doesn't make any sense to me. Not other than her severely exaggerating her role in MGK's fame or something. Either way, I do not understand what she's getting at here other than stroking her own ego.
When people say like, "Oh my God, like what made you work on your own? Like, did you prep?" Truly, no. Because at that point, me and Renelle were not like, it wasn't like she'd fully sort of like come over to me. We basically started really like organically, where I said, "Hey, like, why don't I just help you with your emails at least?" So we started it where like I would go through her.
Oh, she really had no one.
No, she had no one. So we said, and I'll always remember it because at this point I then left England, went to LA. So I was in LA, and that's when Renelle and I kind of started this very organic relationship, and I was checking her emails, I was advising her on stuff, and it was meant to be kind of like a stopgap until she found someone that she wanted to rep her and manage her. And it's always been me.
There is a lot to unpack here. First of all, Jess admits that she didn't prepare at all to go out on her own to start her own business. In an interview from 2017, around the time she started this business, she did remark that you don't need university to do what she does. Which, while technically accurate, also is just bad advice, and her admitting that she really had no education in what she was doing. Sure, you can start your own business and file the paperwork and everything else if you want to, but saying you don't need an education to run your own business is not a good idea. Then she says that Renelle had not fully come over to her to be her representation, so she basically describes the job of what I would call a personal assistant, answering emails. However, she then says she was advising Renelle on stuff. Keep in mind, she never elaborates what this stuff was. The thing is, if you go back to what she previously said, she had never worked with a photographer before. She didn't have any idea. She just figured it out. Which leads me to question what expertise, authority, or anything else did Jess have to be advising Renelle on anything, and why was Renelle listening to her, if at all? What was Renelle advising her on? What jobs to take? How to photograph stuff? She also acts like Renelle wasn't already discovered on some level. Similar to Machine Gun Kelly, Renelle really wouldn't have ever had a problem finding representation. In fact, this whole story implies that Renelle seems to have known this to be the case, considering that she did not choose Jess to represent her immediately, and Jess said this was just temporary until Renelle found someone to rep her. Yet Jess tells this story like she also left her job and started her own company to represent Renelle, when it sounds like she actually started her own company to be Renelle's personal assistant. Then, eventually she says that she had always been Renelle's manager when she says it had always been me, but she hadn't always been Renelle's manager, not according to the details of her own story. That's exactly how it sounds, doesn't it? Well, in my opinion it does. This all become more confusing with the fact that when Renelle did have her own website, after the point in which Jess was allegedly her manager, if you went to her website you could see that to contact her you would get the email address, jess@renelmedrano.com. The reason this stands out to me as odd is you think that if Jess were her manager, which she should have been by that point, the email address would have been jess@jessmoloneymanagement.com. Except it wasn't. This, to me, once again, give off the vibes that Jess was still her personal assistant and answering her emails, not actively acting as a manager or representation. In fact, this contact information remained true all the way up until recently when I publicly made commentary on it and Renelle suddenly shut down her website. It has not been back up since. On top of that, we have the fact that when directly confronted about this and asked, Renelle would not confirm that Jess was her manager. The question stated was, "Is Jess your manager?" and the response was, "Ask Jess." Should it not just be a yes or a no? Though there are quite a few more things I could address in this interview, I do think that I have made my point with everything I have already addressed. So I will be moving on to her next interview with Ms. Skin and the Iconic Women's series.